Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. My name's Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic. A seventh-year doctoral student on... seventh-year doctoral student in clinical psych. Another bozo on the bus. And apparently this is my first day on the show.
Absolutely.
I care about you. Go ahead.
And I'm LouiLou, and my pronouns are he and him. I am in recovery for crystal meth alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. And each week we will provide a brave space where we can engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
Our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please like, share, and comment on this episode. Ding the bell. And please review. Give us a review.
Only give us a review if it's a good review.
No, only give us a review.
If it's a bad review, keep it to yourself.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And now the disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on At the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The material and information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we are just friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Kiki.
Rickety. It was so hard not to jump in. Like I almost tricked Lynn, and I'm Bonnie Violet, trans femme. Hey, girl,
I mean, you could do it now.
That's not your cue.
Yeah. I don't know what happened at the beginning there. It's like I totally
I know what happened.
What happened?
What happened?
Oh, that's what
happened.
It got really deep.
I know,
so
exactly.
fast.
Real quick. That's usually what we do, and it's great for a topic of sex and dating.
It is a topic for sex and dating.
Yes.
I mean, people know who you are, but just in case.
Okay. Hi, people. I'm Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and digital chaplain person living with HIV, and I've been clean and sober for 15 years.
Hey.
Hooray.
Hey.
So let's start. Anthony, how are you doing? Obviously,
Get out of here. Oh my God. I don't even know what to do with myself.
Will you tell us how you are?
That feels so
That's what
sweet.
you do.
You're like, well, you follow the instructions. That's what you do. Today I'm a little stressed out. I have, my first deadlines are November 1st. So I have 8 applications that are due November 1st. So I'm wrapping up my cover letters and all that other stuff. So, I've been, pretty stressed out, but I'm surrounded by a lot of loving people and I have a lot of support. So, that's where I'm at. I just had a delicious chicken sandwich.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah. I had chicken sliders from across the street. I'd say their name, but we probably shouldn't. Well, I don't know what.
We should get them to sponsor us first.
Yeah.
We're going to need some money.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for, what did you say? No savies?
No freebies.
No freebies. But yeah, thank you for asking.
No fronts.
No fronts. How are the two of you?
I'm good. We had I was telling you before, it felt like a really long time since we were last here. We had the Harvest Feast. It's the yearly kind of gala for the country club, where it's an opportunity for folks to come together, talk about the accomplishments, celebrate Brandon and Billy's, and just everybody, and honor folks, and honor the hell out of folks.
It was my first time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The theme was Broadway. And
Broadway
it was
musicals,
interesting.
yeah.
Broadway musicals was really interesting to see all people's takes on and whatever. But the one thing I will tell you is okay, so I didn't dress up like anybody from an actual musical. And of course, the question is, who are you supposed to be? And I hate that. When you dress up on Halloween or you go to a costume party and somebody comes up, I think without knowing, or maybe knowing, folks are really just trying to diminish you or take something away from you.
Probs, yeah.
I just made mine up.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I was I'm Kit Kat dancer number 3, the tranny person living with HIV, the one dancing next to Mimi in the Kit Kat Club in Rent.
Yeah.
That was
I
me.
just told everybody that I was going to pick up a Tony, and I'd been in most of the shows anyway. So it's
I thought about I'm just somebody who would love to go to a Broadway show. This is what I would wear.
I love that. Oh, hey, Stephanie.
Oh, you all look so. Thank you,
Stephanie.
Thank you,
Stephanie. That's very sweet. Yeah, the gala was the gala was a lot of fun. It was nice to have a bunch of people together. I also enjoyed seeing people's costumes.
And Anthony was our MC.
I was the MC
How
this year.
How do you feel about that?
I was very nervous beforehand.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was really nervous beforehand. Mostly because I was in my head because previous years, like all the MCs have been incredible. They've all been great.
Have they?
Well, in my opinion, oh girl, okay. I didn't know what
I'm
to
just
do.
saying.
That just
I'm just saying because it's like you're comparing yourself to previous years, and
well,
I really-
let me
Okay, go.
yeah, let me finish my thought. What I wanted to say is, yeah, I was like, oh
Shut
shit,
up
oh,
and
we
let me-
started. It's not even 5 minutes in. What I wanted to say is that I was very flattered to have been asked, and so I just wanted to do it justice. And by like talking about previous years, like I just thought they all did a great job, and so I wanted to do a good job. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. My partner and I prayed beforehand, and like between speakers, he like would rub my back and like calm me down because I was so anxious the whole time. But
You did great.
thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So today's Bonnie Violet, did he tell us how you're
I
doing?
didn't.
Oh, let's
I was
hear
just waiting for
it.
somebody to ask me. No,
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
That's what you two have in common.
I
'Cause
don't-
it's always
well, I
like
figured I was
trying to shame me.
The
It's like,
last one I
all
needed
right,
to. I
how
needed.
am I doing?
I was just trying to jump in, try to fit into the group.
You're doing a great job.
But
Yeah.
I'm a little emotional. I have a little bit of emotional hangover
From the summit?
from doing the summit this weekend. But it was a fantastic weekend. I definitely relate to feeling like it's been a long time since we were here a week ago.
Yeah.
So we can leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on another successful year. That's
Absolutely.
2 years
Yeah,
now.
That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're not a one hit wonder.
No, maybe 3 hits. Next year we'll do Toronto, but there's already talks about the 2025 too. So.
Oh,
we'll see.
hey, that's how it's got to be.
Yep.
Let's go.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for sharing that.
Bam,
Brandon.
dragonspirituality.com.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yes, thank you.
Brandon's on top.
So for folks who are listening, if you want to read more about the Dragon Spirituality Conference, Brandon, put it back up so I can say it out loud. https://dragonspirituality.com/
And it was nice of you all to let us use the podcast equipment. It really helped the summit
That's
be heard.
like actually
heard.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you.
Of course. So today's topic is sex and dating in recovery. Sex and dating recovery.
Yeah.
Don't you have that little sound machine over there?
Yeah. I know. I was like, I feel like that's a good opportunity for sound.
Yeah, exactly.
Brandon, yeah, that was good. Next time a little sooner, yeah?
Oh,
Wow.
maybe there was spices in that chicken.
Yeah. I'm like, there is something going on with like the energy right now. You know, you're in San Francisco, or you've been living in the East Bay or San Francisco for a long time when you say things like that. Like, oh, the energy here feels,
I know,
insert word.
exactly.
Um,
When you're trying to be shady, I'm all, there's something going on. What's this? What's
What
happening?
is this?
So
What's
today's
happening?
topic is sex and recovery, sex and dating and recovery.
And when we first mentioned it, I think looking back on the topic, we had talked about sex and dating in early recovery, but there was a need for some clarification. And I was thinking, if it's just sex and dating in recovery, then we can talk about all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about whatever happens.
Maybe let's
as
just
we do.
maybe just
As we do, yeah.
I'll moderate for a minute. Let's just start with early recovery.
Yeah,
There you
let's.
go.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's start with early
Beginning.
recovery. Let's start. Yeah, let's start with early recovery.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I just almost took another left turn. Well, because I was thinking about like before recovery. So
Yeah,
like, but early recovery. Y'all have some stories on top of your mind, like front of mind.
Yeah. I mean, when
If
you're-
by dating you mean just having sex, then I have some stories. Otherwise, I am going to just chime in where I can.
Well, you know what's coming up for me is I'm thinking about how we've, sometimes I'll go and I'll listen to previous episodes and we'll have topics where there's so much to talk about and we'll say we'll come back to them and we don't come back to
Of
them.
course not.
But I was thinking that like sex and dating is one of those topics that has come up a lot. And so I feel like there's always so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think dating, both of those things like changed for me, obviously, before and after. But I feel like there was a lot of like old behavior in the very beginning,
Mhm.
like, I don't know. How do y'all decide who to talk to and date, like at least in early recovery versus now?
Well, when I So like before I got into recovery, I was a bit of a serial monogamist.
I
Like
see.
I was always in a relationship, and that was really important to me. It was always a toxic,
Mm.
not great relationship, especially the final one that really kind of took me to my bottom. I think that really pushed me to get sober a little bit. But I think it also depends on what you're in recovery from, because I know CMA has a little bit different mentality around maybe sex in early recovery. Whereas like where I got sober in Idaho, my sponsor was my sponsor very much kept telling me I needed to get laid.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want to. And then he's like, no, you should, like, it'll be okay. And I was like, no, I really don't want to. And then like, I was like a few months into recovery, and I remember I dropped $100 and some for like an eHarmony account or something. And I told him,
Wow.
he's like, girl, I told you to have sex. I didn't tell you to date. Like,
oh,
you
interesting.
ain't ready for that. I was like, I just spent $100 and some.
Yeah, you're like, well, I'm dating now.
Right. No, I just didn't do it. I think in early recovery, I really didn't want to, I didn't know what to do. I was happy with the results that I was getting in early recovery. And I just kind of did what was suggested to me for the most part, because I'd really just come to resign to the idea that I didn't know what was best for me.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I was just like, okay, whatever you say, I do. But I definitely was willing to think that that doing something different was really what I was looking for, because I wanted different results. And my sexual relationships, my last relationship, the guy punched me in the face.
Oh my God.
He stalked me. Like there was a lot of just,
Yeah.
it was just really not cute. And so I really didn't mind separating myself from that sort of situation either.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to
think
hear
we
that.
should-
That's horrible. Yeah.
I think we should clarify. Okay, so we all experience 12-step, and I think there's a misconception that there's just this hard, fast rule that you can't have sex or be in a relationship until you get to a year of recovery. It's a suggestion.
Yeah. Let's talk about
It's
that.
a suggestion, and what I do, like, as long as I was sponsored, and I've never had a sponsor tell me not to, but as long as when I'm working with individuals who are especially brand new, the way that I preface it, because I also knowing me and how I feel about relationships, I want to show up in the most objective way that I can. And so the way that I present it is like, early recovery is challenging as it is. And when you decide that you want to date or even just have sex or whatever, the challenge is that you have to take someone else into consideration. And so this is usually, early recovery is an opportunity for you to kind of be a little selfish, to focus in on you. There is absolutely nothing wrong, but it's like you get to check your motive as you go. And again, you have to take someone else into consideration.
Yeah, well, I think you start to, at least for me, I started to recognize the difference between sex and dating, that they can be different things, right? That especially the way that I was.
Yeah, well, if
dating,
they're not obsession, because I think
right.
The distinction is like, if they are distinctly different things and you're doing them in a healthy way, whatever that means. But I usually think a lot of times early on, there's an obsessive component to how people are showing up in those two areas.
Yeah. I didn't have sex, or I wasn't in relationships. I was in a relationship when I first got sober. So there was like a little sex in a relationship, but once that was done, I was kind of like just done.
Yeah.
At least my first year, I remember.
Yeah. It's interesting because when we talk about like the suggestion of no dating and sex and the vegan in like early recovery, I've been of the opinion for quite some time that if it isn't in the big book, it's like people are making shit up. Except that I will say that one of the things that I've noticed, and I think we've talked about this before, is that the only thing I can think of, at least like biologically, like the dangers of dating and sex in early recovery is that when a person is withdrawing from substances, they will often go like stimulation seeking. And so it's very easy to do that with sex and with dating. And so I can see that being like the reason why, but I don't know if that's why people make that suggestion.
Well, I think sometimes it's hard for people to put them in their recovery first when they're in a relationship, especially like early on, because you're still, at least my feeling is, you're still kind of figuring out what your part is and where you begin and where the rest of the world begins. And so I think I've noticed that sometimes it seems like, and oftentimes in early recovery, they say anything you put in front of your recovery, you could lose. You know what I mean, I think it can happen maybe, or I mean, that can happen anytime.
Yeah. Like this is my own thing. But I feel like just as a general rule, it's probably a good idea not to date someone unless they've done their 4th and 5th step, because I feel like that's when people are really starting to look at their own stuff and they're starting to basically like develop some awareness around like their part in interpersonal relationships. I wanted to go back a little bit because I think part of like what can make dating. Did I say gating?
I thought you said gating.
That's hilarious.
A new thing.
It's probably the like leftover chicken stuck in my mouth. There's like, you know how sometimes like things get lodged into your gums and you don't know until like 11 p.m.
I've never had anything.
Is that gross?
I've never had anything lodged in my mouth that made me change the
pronunciation.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, but like
maybe it did.
About that?
Yeah.
Right.
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes.
God, what the hell was I going to say? Oh, so I think part of the complication in talking about dating is like, what are we calling dating?
Yeah.
Right? I think so. And I say that because of the work that I've done in SLAW and Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous is like getting clarity around what does it mean to actually date someone. So for some people, hooking up is dating.
Yeah.
That can be like conceived as dating. Yeah. So I think that's part of it too. I think it's like when I think about like sex and dating in general, like in recovery, and the same ways that we have like our own conception of a higher power, so too can we like what sex and dating looks like. And I think those things only become kind of problematic when they don't serve us. So it's like,
absolutely,
this is what I'm calling dating, but I always end up heartbroken, or I always end up relapsing.
Yeah, this is it's early on. It's super important that the conversation be had between the sponsee and their sponsor. Because I think one of the things that I can just speak about my relationship with certain sponsees, where I used to have to try to encourage them to see that taking a little break from something doesn't mean that you stop altogether. Yeah. But it's like if it's problematic and you're not willing to look at it because you're so concerned about like wanting to be in a relationship, then that's a problem.
Yeah,
or wanting to be in a sex situation. I don't know.
Right. Well, and I think in the beginning, what kind of falls along that too is like some of us are already in relationships, like we're married or we're in certain circumstances. And I remember just being told not to make any really big changes unless you have to, and that's so like relationships or new jobs or big moves or like to really do those sorts of things to really like. Usually if it's being done, it's because like it has to done because of like safety or, what I mean? Some other sort of reason.
Yeah. And I think that falls in line with the stimulation seeking, like all of that stuff. I feel like as an aside, I think one of the things we don't talk about in recovery is, so I'm thinking about, there's so much coming up for me. So related to all of this, I'm just thinking about what it feels like to get sober in early recovery, and how, at least for me, for example, I had like all the feelings and all the thoughts because, you took away the drugs and the alcohol, and then I was like left with myself. And so that there's like this little biological process that people go through, and there are ways that people try to cope with those biological processes. And the things that I feel like we don't really have language for directly are like, like people will sometimes overeat, or they'll overspend, or they'll date, or they'll have like a lot of sex, or they'll do all of this stuff in early recovery. And I feel, like we hear that in people's shares on the floor, but there isn't much, like, I feel like there's nothing that like points to it directly. And that, you know what I'm trying to say here?
Well, yeah. But I feel like also, at least my feeling is that sex isn't usually lumped into that label. Cause I feel like there's like,
which label?
In early recovery, like you have grace if you shop a little extra, or you eat a little wonky, or you like whatever, like, or you smoke, they say, don't you can just do that later or whatever. But sex, for whatever reason, has more of an opinion typically.
Yeah, of course.
Versus all that other
I mean,
stuff.
I mean, it's talked about in the big book, right?
Yeah, because everybody brings their
Mhm.
experience and their like criticisms or whatever they have about sex.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
like
I love the way the big book talks about it. Like basically in the big on page 69, basically it says people are extreme. Either people want a lot of it or people want nothing part of it, you know? Actually, I had dinner with two of my sponsees recently, and they actually represent that spectrum.
I love it.
You know what I mean? They represent that kind of spectrum. And I thought like, oh, that's so interesting. Anyway, where are we going? So dating, sex. Oh, we were talking about that sex is normally not lumped in. Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's kind of treated as this even more like taboo and kind of more rules. Like it's a special area, if you will, in early recovery.
Yeah.
At least if we're thinking about like, and from my experience with dealing with like alcohol or drug recovery, you know, it might be a little bit different, obviously, like an SLAA or maybe other recovery programs that
we start to have conversations. I know, I'm sure you guys, we start to have conversations about like how, I would say like in early recovery, when I came in, I knew exactly what the issues were. And when I started to address them, my addiction is so insidious. It starts to become a little more nuanced. It'll spill out into something else, and it spills out into how I show up sexually, how I show up eating wise, you know, all of those things. And so I think that it's still an issue that because we don't see. Let me not say we. I bring my past experience with sex and sexuality and all that good stuff, and I think I've approached when someone's acting out maybe sexually a lot differently than if someone's acted out, you know, eating a lot or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's historical context for that. Like I think this is like a really good example of how culture informs some of the opinions we have, because I think about. I mean, obviously we're like LGBT plus podcasts and the fellowships we tend to be in are LGBT plus. And so I think part of that has to do with like the history of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And then just like the awareness that I think our community has around like sexuality and, you know,
sexual liberation.
Yeah. Like sexual liberation and it just kind of reconceptualizing that. And so I think I'm just speculating, but you know, maybe that has to do with why there's more conversation around that, at least in what I'll call queer recovery. Because when I've been in like straight sober spaces, I don't hear them talk about it.
But they
often
create a lot more boundaries and like within the process,
with like the
it's
gender,
like men can only be with women and women can only be men, just and specifically so they don't fuck.
And also in AA specifically, like they don't talk about like sex as much. Like it's quite common in CMA.
Oh yeah.
And to me, my perception in coming into CMA after AA was like it feels like it's encouraged for people in early CMA recovery to have sex with other people in early CMA recovery. But to me, my understanding was that is so that you can begin to learn what it's like to have sober sex and to do it in a way in which that's.
I didn't get that.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
To start
I didn't get that, but what I got more from that is that, you know, I believe that there's a amount of time that you set it on the shelf, but you can't do it forever.
Yeah.
Like it's an issue that you're going to have to address at some point. Like if I had known early on that I should have sex with other people and CMA, no, honestly.
I mean, that was just my perception is kind of, because I feel like I pop in and out of CMA.
I think that you got a snapshot of a really toxic meeting.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. Like that was my understanding of like San Francisco specific, like CMA. Like that's what I had heard from. I don't know if that was just maybe new people wanting to get in my pants.
I feel like no, you're right. But I feel like there are some folks in that fellowship that think that way because they have a very kind of free relationship with sex and sexuality.
But there's also like going to the bathhouse together or going
those meetings.
Okay, that's There's a specific meeting that celebrates kink, and that's what they do.
Right.
I would.
But there's no
I know
early
that I have no
people.
control. Huh?
But early people go to that too.
I would discourage
Mm.
till the cows come home, because I think
Cows. I'm
what
sorry.
no, for me.
That's another meeting.
Okay, so for me,
No.
I always have
Okay.
this. I always have this concern. Like, okay, so say you get right with something, and you're good with it, and when you're good with it, you're all passionate about it. But sometimes you can be blind to the fact that
totally.
other people aren't there yet. And I think that's kind of what I saw in that specific meeting.
Mhm.
And I want to celebrate the meeting, but I also want folks. I
To be
want to.
mindful.
I can show up if folks are being responsible, and that's why there was a new sex meeting that's an A meeting that's here at the club. And what I really liked about it is it came from a place of let's talk about the recovery.
Mm.
Let's bring our higher power into this. We can get to a place. We can get to that place with all of those things, but we got some work to do. And I
Right.
think that's maybe the message in all of this. Underneath it is like, put it on hold so you can do the work, because it's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
Sex isn't going.
Maybe
Go
we can
ahead,
talk
Bonnie,
about
Viola.
sex not in early recovery.
I mean,
then.
I don't even. So
what does it develop into? What can it look like?
what sex and dating and
Yeah.
recovery? Well, I
Obviously,
Look at- this is how
multiple
bad-
partner.
Well, this is how
non-
my ADHD is so bad. I wrote this down because I was going to write notes next to it, and then I
Sex,
forgot to write the
dating.
notes. I wrote sex.
Because this is such a juicy.
I always
juicy thing,
I always
you
wonder
know?
what you're writing.
Oh,
and now I can
they're my
see
notes.
it's-
Yeah.
yeah.
But
It
so
was so much
He's writing
grander
love-
in my
he's writing
head.
love notes.
It was so much grander in my head.
yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah, they're just like single words, so I
Totally,
don't forget
I
things.
get it.
I love this idea of bringing in God into dating and
Yes,
bringing God
totally.
into sex. I think one of the worst things, I don't even know if I believe this. I don't know if I believe what I'm about to say. So one of the worst things that I feel like I could have been told in early recovery, which no one told me this. It was someone who shared it. In fact, it was in this room.
This
Uh-huh.
And I was
Which
sitting
chair?
3 seats back, and it was up here. And it's a person who no longer lives here. He lives in Sacramento, but he was saying that he fucked his way through his first 5 years of recovery, and that's how he stayed sober. I heard that shit and I ran with
It's like,
it.
yes.
Okay, and I'm like, oh, I can do that.
I've heard that before too. Some people who still say that.
Yeah, and what ended up happening is like I ended up realizing I had another addiction, or I don't know if I developed it, but so the reason why I don't know if I believe what I'm saying is because what if that's what I needed to have happen?
And
You know what I mean?
It
And like,
was.
Well,
to
maybe
some
you
degree, right?
maybe you needed it.
yeah, I
to-
mean that's what
maybe
I mean.
you needed it to
Yeah.
figure out that you needed another program. So I think
Yeah.
that Rule 62, there's no rules. That
Yeah.
like as much as I want to, like, especially now that I've had some time in recovery, the issue with I've had sponsees who come in relationships that are toxic, sponsees who come in relationships that are amazing.
Mhm.
Not everybody has an
Yeah.
issue with this.
Can-
And I think
yes,
it's
yes, yes,
I think when
I
we
wanna
do
write
the
on your
work to
paper.
get when we do the work to get to know each other, to get to find that intimacy, to find that connection or whatever, and we find out that there's not, and each individual, I take a different approach
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
we got to. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I get to focus in on what I need to focus in on, and
Right.
the other stuff. If it's not a problem, I'm not going to go look for a problem and try to create one there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I went to this meeting. So over the course of 2 days, I've had my mind has started to shift around some of this stuff. So I hung out with 2 of my sponsees yesterday, and they represent different
The lollipop guild.
parts. Well, I have 3 of them, but they represent like, oh, I see what you just did. I would have written that down, Bonnie, by like Lollipop Guild. Look up. So,
I know what it is.
but I look up for myself,
Not
but
for
I know
you.
who they are. So
Okay.
don't pull me off topic. So I was with my 2 sponsees, and I noticed that they like I said, they represent extremes of each other, right? And what's interesting is that because they represent extremes of each other, like their personalities are kind of complementary to that. Not to each other, but they're complementary. And so like later on that day, like I was at home and I was thinking to myself, like, oh, like that's what it looks like. You know what I mean? Like this is what it looks like to like live like such like this way and this way. I'm being judicious with my words. So to this morning, I went to a morning meeting and they were talking about a psychic change. And I think my psychic change around a lot of this stuff, and this is what I love about the big book, is that my struggle with things are my struggles with things. And that what other people do is none of my business. And if I am like wrapped up in other people's business, like there's something going on for me, right? And so when I think about like my dating or like my sexual behavior, like my history brought me to those things, you know, and and for whatever reason. And like how I show up to those situations is also unique to me. And so similarly, like I think I also have to bring grace to, hey, we're using grace. Not that you have like ownership of that word, but like anytime it's brought up, we like Bonnie Violet always talks about grace.
She never shuts up about it.
Oh my God, all she ever wants to talk about is grace this and grace that. And I got a dog and I named her Grace. So what I was just thinking, wow. Yeah, I don't know what this it's so hot.
It is.
But I think where I'm getting with this is that like, I think another way of saying is like, it's none of my business, is that no one fucking knows anything. You know what I mean? Like no one really, I think, you know, the reason why we have suggestions is because maybe like collectively we've like witnessed certain behaviors and certain patterns. And we're like, hey girl, like most of the time when people go down that street, they don't come back, you know? But no one really knows, you know?
Yeah. When you,
I love that place, that place when you have that spiritual awakening around, it's none of my business, or I don't get to interject my thoughts onto your humanity or what you're about. An experience connected to that recovery and going to conferences and things like that. I used to go, and when I was in judgment on what other people were doing, and I felt like, oh, there's so much sexual energy and people are there for the wrong reasons and all that good stuff. And then all of a sudden it shifted. And it shifted when I realized I get to go and decide what I'm going to get from this. If I want to go and hook up the whole time, I can do that. If I want to go and not hook up. And when I got to that place, I realized those conferences aren't overly sexual. I was overly focused on other people's shit and missing out on paying attention to what was important to me.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with my partner not too long ago about, man, that I had to, I don't know if I'm going to share this one. Oh, maybe I will. Just a little bit of it. But there was like, so one,
tread lightly.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know. Well, no, I've already started. But I'll share in a general way.
Okay. That's what we do at meetings.
Basically, and yeah, what it was like. So basically, we were having this conversation where I basically, without knowing it, was superimposing my own ideas onto him. And then I stopped myself and I'm like, oh my God, this has nothing to do with you. And this is 100% my own shit. And I'm lucky, like I feel fortunate in that like I caught myself.
He's really good at calling you on that shit, huh?
Well, I feel like
in a loving way.
Well, yeah, I mean, our communication is like very good. And I think we do have like the type of relationship where we can do that kind of stuff. But what I appreciate, and then I'll stop kind of singing our praises. What I appreciate is that we're pretty good.
Really?
Well, we're pretty good at doing that for ourselves. Okay. So we don't really need to do that for each other.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just love this so much.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, some of what, kind of to go back to some of what was being said, was just like around harm reduction and progress, not perfection. You know, with that idea, like maybe like when you talked about 5 years of whatever, you know, like maybe that's the progress, not the perfection that gets you to whatever. And it is very, very relative. And I think we do have to be mindful of like, are we lying to ourselves? Which I think is something that you were talking about earlier on, was that idea of, you know, like, am I just fooling myself into thinking that this is progress or this is good for me, when in actuality it's not. There was something else I was going to bring up.
Oh, did you want me to write? I wrote fear, my thinking, controlling behavior.
I know I was holding on to progress, not perfection, and harm reduction for a while.
Well, you know what I will say, if we don't talk about this at all, I think that we are very fortunate in that when we come in, you know, I always encourage people to find their tribe, and we learn how to be with each other in healthy ways. And I think that it is in that that we learn how to be in relationship with others, and love relationships or whatever. I think that, that I always say the song, this one's connected to that one or whatever. When we think we're not doing the work, we're doing the work.
Right.
You're doing the work, learning how to show up. Like, first off, learning how to show up for myself. How do I view me and my worth? And as long as like, for me, I don't know about y'all, but like, when I get to a place where I'm super passionate about what I'm passionate about for me, it challenges me to see that other people have every right to be that way for themselves. And then that way you get to show up in a way where I'm like thoughtful and caring, and I want to know and learn and love about you. And isn't that what being in a relationship is about? It's about, it's not about like compromising yourself, but compromising, and being, like I say to my sponsors, you got to take other people into consideration, and want it, and not in a way that's laborious or whatever. I'm using big words,
right?
But where you want to do it, where it's wonderful, and it's like it's something that adds to you. It's like it's like a bonus. It's not. It's not. Yeah.
Well, what you're making me think of is what it feels like for me to feel connected to a power greater than myself. So, okay, let me try to make this less abstract. But so one of the gifts of recovery is that I have a better sense of when my body is responding addictively to something, right? So like for sometimes what that means, like with the obsession of the mind, like if I find myself like constantly going to something in my head or constantly going to something in my body and being controlled by it, like I have a better sense of that now, where I'm like, oh, like for example, like the recent thing for me has been like sugar. Like for the last few days, I consume so much sugar late at night, and I know it's addiction because I can't stop thinking about it and I need to consume it, right?
I just have this vision of you in a funnel.
Well, for me it's like boba. It's like boba or ice cream. Anyway, so that's been one of the gifts of recovery. And I think like getting that internal sense of what addiction feels like, I can apply to so many different things, including sex and dating.
And when is it addiction and when is it just our humanity? Because I think to be human is to be an addict. Like, I think that's what makes us not God.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. Brene Brown, I can't believe I just brought it up. But it's been a while. But
I know, I haven't talked to her about her.
But Brene Brown talks about that, where she talks about how like we're basically all addicted to stuff, and how like,
well, especially Americans and America in general.
America, fuck yeah. But it's about wanting to, and the addiction, because who doesn't want to be relieved of discomfort,
Right, yeah. And there, I think there is an element of that's okay. It's the balance of it.
100%.
If you can balance, I think the challenge
100%.
is like, everything is good in moderation.
But even if it gets wonky, it gets wonky. Like, we adjust.
And if
exactly.
Wonky
an okay word to use.
If you're able to pull back, like, I think that the beauty for me for recovery now is like I can go off the deep end, but as long as I know I have tools to kind of find my way back.
Well, I remember when earlier you said, sorry,
no, it's fine.
Earlier you said something like, that people just made that up. One of the rules.
Oh, I said that if it's not in the big book.
But the big book is made up too.
Yeah, girl, you know what I'm saying.
It's all made up. Yeah. I know. I just but I mean, I think just to kind of bring that back to the idea that like it's all, but also in the things that are made up does not mean that it's not valid or it's not helpful.
Of course, yeah, of course.
And so wisdom is when we're able to kind of take a lot of different information,
absolutely,
emotions, our personal experience, maybe other people's experience, and then moving forward with that. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in potentially in all of that.
I think I think it's a great start. The big book is a great start, but then you go beyond. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it reminds me of my sponsor said to me years ago, that the steps are there to clear the path between you and God, and once that path is cleared, then you're doing, what I mean? Like, that's between you. I forget what I was thinking about, but I was thinking about obsession of the mind, allergy of the body. I don't remember. Fear. No, not fear.
So I was gonna,
go ahead.
Maybe if you
go ahead,
just shut me up. So the work that I do with my sponsor now, like we started out with the steps and with the traditions and really kind of a prescribed kind of relationship to the big book and everything. And now what we do is like everything we do, we bring our experience as recovered men to it, our discussion. And so it does not matter what we do, what we read. It does not have to be an AA approved literature. Like I was saying, we read How to Be an Anti-Racist, the Four Agreements, just a number of different things. And we brought our experience to that. And it's really nice because what it's done is it's opened me up in a way where, we talk about practicing the principles and all our affairs, but living it is the challenge. It's like I'm all living it and saying that everything I do is my recovery.
I remembered. So now a comment about the big book. So I feel like the big book or like the 12 steps are really good, or rather the big book is really good at stopping the bleeding, right? But like if you're going to live like a fuller life, you can't just like read the big book, like there's actual work that you have to do and it's ongoing. That was my first thought. Then my second thought was to your point about, like we're all addicts essentially. Like, I think this is covered like really well when we talk about like the fourth step, and the way it's described in the big book is basically that, we all have human instincts, and it's when we exceed our human instincts. It's when we want more than our fair share. And I think that can be applied to obviously so many different things, but sticking to topic, if we're talking about sex and dating, it's like how much, like what exactly does that look like? You know what I mean? And is it kind of taking you, is it compromising your serenity or your like or your peace of mind, which I don't know. And again, like, we don't know, who knows, you know what I mean? And one of the things my sponsor always says is like years ago, she was saying to me, she's like, we don't really know what we want or need. We don't really know what we want or need.
That's part of the process.
Yeah. We don't really know what we want or need. And I remember saying to her, but I don't want anyone to lie to me. And she's like, but what if it's it's someone's lie that gets you to, what I mean? And so,
yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of the journey. It's like, you have to keep going. Like maybe initially that saying you go to the hardware store to get a gallon of milk, and you become more interested. You really explore what it is that I'm looking for. And maybe it wasn't even a gallon of milk to begin with that you're wanting to get. And really and that's maybe a horrible analogy, but this idea of like getting better at knowing what it is that you really want or desire or need, and actually like really knowing what that is, and then being able to actually match that with something that can give you that versus, settling.
So what you're saying is you have to do in order to figure that out.
You do. Yeah. I think so. I think it is a process of like elimination, right?
Yeah, no,
and exploration, and in order to figure that out.
What I've been trying to do with my sponsees, especially, is like, because I'm going through this without going into detail, I'm going through something very related to this topic, and this individual's in early recovery, and I'm all, what? Just be open to having a conversation about it. If you're doing things and you're doing things in the dark, that's when you get to ask yourself, what's going on. I want you to feel comfortable enough to talk about it, because number one, I like to say, I don't get to judge. I don't get to tell you what to do. You're an adult.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it. But if you're doing it and you're not talking about it, you might be feeling some sort of way about it. And then that's when you get to talk about
Suppression, repression, lying about those kind of behaviors is really harmful. But I think,
go ahead.
I think also one of the things that, like, if you are finding yourself in that spot, especially around like sexual behaviors or sexual things, I know for me, I had a lot of sexual like kink desires or experiences that I was really trying to suppress because for some reason I just thought they weren't cute. But I still did them, and then I would feel some sort of way about it. And so I eventually kind of just decided, I'm going to get curious. Like, why is it that I have this desire, and what is it that I'm looking for from this? Is it helpful? Is it useful? And trying to be a little bit more curious about it and talk with other people about it, kind of bring some light to it versus, trying to fight it, because then usually I fight it. And then once it actually happens, I'm not prepared for what's actually going to happen. And then that leads to, I think, potential harm to myself and potentially to other people because, things aren't clearly communicated or whatever.
Yeah. You're making me think of, regardless of what the thing is that grips us, but like the things that grip us, you know, like whether it's an idea or a feeling, whether it's like more specific things like shame or anger or happiness or love. Like there are all these things that kind of grip us. And I should speak for myself, but these things that grip me and can pull me off center. And how I think I think one of the difficulties in talking about something like a God is like this idea of, you know, is there truth with a capital T, and is that what we're all trying to get to, you know, and how do we get to that? And I think maybe what's happening in conversation for us right now, at least today, is that we're realizing that there's so many different ways to get to whatever that capital T is, if there is a capital T.
Totally.
I think we need to start wrapping up.
Yeah,
It
so
is.
Yeah.
long. Like
Louis, did you just do this?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
playing with my
Wrap
thing.
it up.
Oh no, I thought that was you telling me to wrap it up.
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBT recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to opportunity, community, and support.
You can find more information, including all of the ways to contact us at www.castrocountryclub.org Did I get it right?
That's right.
Podcast. Yeah.
Nice.
Tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels. Brandon, before you do anything, I also wanted to give a shout out to Amanda Ireland Esquivel. I think her name is Esquivel. Esquivel from True Colors Recovery. I think she recently came to visit us. I think it was today, but anyway, we wanted just to say what's up to Amanda. Shout out to everyone over at True Colors Recovery in Portland. We love you. And we have one more thing on the screen.
You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate and subscribe.
Yes.
Podcast.
Absolutely.